As we go into training camp for the Lions, one of the biggest questions from fans is, will we see any of the starters in the preseason, maybe even in the Hall of Fame game? Let's talk about it. Hi, this is Mike Payton from A to Z Sports Detroit. Today we're going to talk about whether or not the Lions are going to have any of their starters out on the field during the preseason or in the Hall of Fame game. As we mentioned at the top of the video, the Lions will have the Hall of Fame game this year. That adds a fourth preseason game to their slate, which is different from what the Lions have done in the last few years, where it's only been 3, and then you get that final week of the summer in order to make cuts. Now it's 4, and then you get that final week of the summer in order to make cuts. Will that mean that the Lions potentially have some space for some of their starters to play? Since they're starting camp a little bit earlier, there's this kind of idea, this thought that, well, that's a lot of time without reps if they're not going to be playing in the preseason game. Well, here's the thing. We know that the Lions don't really do that. They don't really put their starters out, at least not all of them, for preseason games. They're more keyed into the joint practices they're going to have. Now, the Lions do have 2 sets of joint practices this year. They're going to practice 2 days with the Dolphins, and then the following week, 1 day with the Texans before they have their preseason outings against both teams. Dan Campbell has talked in the past at length about how he looks at these joint practices as more important to the starters than the preseason, because they're getting a lot more reps in these things than they would in a preseason game, where they would probably come in and play a drive or 2, maybe a quarter at most. In this case, they're getting a game's worth of reps 3 times during preseason, and they're getting actual, real competition. You saw against the New York Giants last year just how deep and how competitive everybody was when everyone was getting in with fights and all that stuff. I don't know if that's going to happen against the Dolphins or Texans, especially since both teams, the Lions and the Giants, got fined so much money last year for doing it. But the idea is that they're going to bank so many reps during that time that they just aren't going to want to put any of those guys in the preseason game, and they're going to use those for the younger guys, which is where some of maybe the starters could wind up playing. Christian Mahogany, Tate Ratledge, some of these younger guys that you expect to start could wind up playing in those games just to get more reps, just to get some in-game reps, as well as those joint practice reps too. So I would not at this point expect any starters to play in any of the 4 preseason games, not even for a drive. I would definitely look for, this is the time for the young guys. This is the time for the rookies. This is the time for the undrafted guys to try to get themselves a spot on the 53-man roster, or at least a 16-man practice squad. We'll see what happens with all these guys, but I would not expect Jared Goff or Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jahmyr Gibbs or any of these guys to be out there taking reps in preseason games, and you probably don't want that anyways. So that is that. We'll get some more information as Dan Campbell starts to talk to media here at the end of the week, and we'll go from there. We'll see you next time.